Hey guys, and welcome back to the Layah Heilpern show, the place where we have some of the hottest conversations on the entire internet. So today we are talking about Bitcoin and how it can become the fastest cryptocurrency in the world for sending money. So joining me to have this discussion is the CEO of Tectum, Russell Shawn. Russell, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Yeah, very well. How about you, Layah? Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you. I'm so excited to have this conversation, especially because the market is pumping right now. Bitcoin is
Absolutely.
pumping. So it's going to be brilliant. So before we get into all of this, I want to focus on Bitcoin because there's just so many people who think Bitcoin is great, but they do believe it has a lot of scaling issues. You know, some say it's too expensive, it's too slow. So, Russell, can you tell us what Tectum is and how you're solving this problem with Bitcoin and essentially just making it more efficient?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, Layah. And everybody's heard of the BTC trilemma or the blockchain trilemma. It's the idea that PTC has great security and it's got great privacy and decentralization, but the scalability is the issue. So Tectum is our blockchain. It's a blockchain that we've been developing for over 6 years, and we've got it to 1.3 million transactions. And we've got it set up so it can be in a decentralized sense. But the issue is, of course, all the credibility, all the history that goes with Bitcoin makes it such a strong currency or a cryptocurrency. So what we aimed to do was ensure that we could combine the two, make Bitcoin scalable on our blockchain. And essentially, we came out with the soft node. And the soft node aims to overcome all the problems of the Lightning Network. That's its aim. We followed the project very closely. We love the Lightning Network, but we saw some pitfalls. But the idea of the soft node is we can now make Bitcoin a lot faster and a lot cheaper than it currently is, while still holding on to the great security, great decentralization that comes with a network.
That's the thing, isn't it? Because it's always that trilemma, security versus decentralization when you're trying to scale. And
Absolutely.
actually, yeah, it's just so fascinating. And this soft note, I'd never heard of anything quite like this before until obviously I came across Tectum. So can you explain to me what is a soft note?
Yeah, absolutely. It is an incredibly novel idea. We don't know of anybody in the industry doing something like this. So if you imagine a BTC wallet layer,
Yeah.
that BTC wallet holds Bitcoin. But we came up with a novel concept whereby rather than trying to move the Bitcoin as the Lightning Network currently does, we've decided to move the ownership of Bitcoin. But to accomplish this, of course, you've got to split Bitcoin up into denominations. And if you think back to when first gold was assigned paper notes or it was assigned a representation of the notes, people realized that gold was not scalable. You couldn't carry bullion bars to go and buy a house. You
Yeah.
didn't want to take that a certain distance. So you had to find a representation of the gold. And that's exactly what a soft node is. It's a serial number and a passcode. It represents a Bitcoin wallet. And you can then, on our blockchain, that's 1.3 million transactions, be able to move that representation about very quickly and very cheaply. So we do have an image attached to our soft node, and you can go to the web page that connects to our blockchain and see that imagery. It's great imagery, but essentially it is just a serial number and a passcode that gives you access to those private keys of the Bitcoin wallet that's been denominated.
So it's such a different idea, you know, because everybody's always building that layer two scaling solution like the Lightning Network. So I want to get more detail on this. You mentioned that you are a fan of the Lightning Network, and you know you like what they've done, and you know you've been following it for a long time. But how is Lightning different then to the soft note?
Yeah, great question, Leia. And the way we see it is the way they set up the Lightning Network with their initial stage was completely right. They looked rather to move Bitcoin, but move a representation of a Bitcoin. So you've got on the Lightning Network a ledger and it records any transactions that go between you and the recipient. But they didn't go as far as we thought they should have gone. We believe that they should have taken this the whole way and just
Mm.
moved the ownership of Bitcoin. So as things currently stand, you've got the limitation of, they've done it on a multi-sig wallet basis. So you've got the limitation of the sender and the recipient. It's very hard to keep a trustless system. And a trustless system just means that you don't have to trust a third party or centralized authority. It's quite complex to keep that and take it outside one sender and one recipient without then compromising decentralization. So as things currently stand with the Lightning Network, you've either got to stay in that channel, or if you use routing, you've then got to bring in a watchtower system. So what we're finding with the Lightning Network is people are settling a lot more frequently than they had anticipated, because people don't want to open these routing channels. They want to get back into Bitcoin that's so trusted. And we saw this play out in El Salvador. I don't know how much you track that, Layah, but the Lightning Network was the underlying system of the Chiva and Strike wallet out in El Salvador. And it was set to transform the industry, make the national currency of El Salvador Bitcoin. But the problem was, as soon as you go into McDonald's, your Lightning Network transaction works perfectly. But if you want to switch over to KFC, then you've either got to go through a routing channel, which was taking a long time to open, or you had to settle on the Bitcoin native network. Yeah. And I think if the latest that Layah was 70% of El Salvadorians no longer trust the Lightning Network and BTC.
Oh, wow.
80% of companies are refusing to accept it. Now, for us, if they had gone the full way and just continued to move the ownership of Bitcoin, that problem wouldn't have happened. Because when you're moving just the ownership of Bitcoin, you're not limited to a multi-sig wallet, you're not limited to a channel.
Wow, that's actually one issue that I personally have with the Lightning Network. It's opening all these multiple channels. Yeah. I don't like that. I think it's a lot. I think it's difficult. But in terms of moving the ownership of Bitcoin, I find that so fascinating. How safe is that? Like, how do you, what are you doing? You're not moving the Bitcoin, but you're moving the private keys, the seed phrase, like you're moving the wallet. Like, how do you do that? And how safe is that?
Yeah, exactly, Layah. So we're moving the private keys. The private keys, of course, have never been hacked. I think the latest estimate said that it would take millions upon millions of years for a quantum computer to hack private keys, to brute force hack. But that's when you don't even have the public keys. I mean, you've got to have the public keys to experiment with that. So because it's such a secure system, the way we've approached it is we actually encrypt those private keys on our blockchain. And then the passcode that you get with your serial number gives you access to those private keys if you ever want to burn your softnode. But the idea is, because you're not limited to this channel like you are with the Lightning Network, as soon as we've developed the mainstream adoption that we're looking for, people won't ever burn their softnode because they know they have access to that. It's a little bit like saying, did anybody ever go back and get their gold and split it up when they had the notes to represent it? They didn't have to, because the value was there. So as long as we can create that value, which we believe we have done with such a secure system, people stay within the softnode, knowing that they can always get access to those private keys if they ever want to get their Bitcoin out.
So how simple is it to use a soft note and to access it for just a normal Bitcoin holder, you know, like a mum or a dad? How easy is it to use a soft note? Because I know, by the way, I know the Lightning Network, a lot of people struggle to use that if they're not super technical.
Absolutely. And this is one of the most incredible things about the soft node. Because it's an image, it can turn into a web page. The web page is just based on the serial number. You could go to cash.softnode right now, put in your serial number, and you have access to that soft node. That soft node lets you see the Bitcoin that's backing it on the Bitcoin ledger through blockchain.com or any of those major websites that list the Bitcoin ledger. So you know the finance is always there. You're never going to incur the issues that we had with FTX, not knowing that the backing is there. But it's so simple to use because it's just a web page. As long as you hold on to that passcode, then you will always have access to that soft node. And the fascinating thing is, Layah, because we've taken it off the blockchain environment, you can then send it over WhatsApp Messenger, you can send it over Facebook Messenger, and it is no longer confined to these constraints that every single cryptocurrency that we're aware of is at the moment, whereby you have to be in a Web3 environment, you have to be in a blockchain environment.
I think that's so important because, like I said, with the Lightning Network, it's so complicated for the average person to get in. And if you're I guess expanding the ecosystem to Web 2, to, you know, things like WhatsApp and just sort of instant messaging, and you're able to, you know, bring people in that way, then it makes a lot of sense. But how similar are you to paper wallets? Because it does sort of sound like that in terms of, you know, having, in terms of like moving the ownership and being able to pass on the private keys.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds similar, but there are basically no similarities in this sense. Yes, you can print a soft note out, but that's as far as it goes. You print out your paper wallet, you've got your public key, and you've got your private key there. That has so many security issues. I think there was a documentary done recently about a CCTV surveillance system actually picking up and reading the private keys on one of these paper wallets.
Oh, wow.
You can't take it anywhere, you can't read it. You've got to ensure that you're looking over your shoulder as to whoever's near you, because they could pick that up. And so essentially our private keys are never seen. They're not even seen by the blockchain. The nodes can't see them because they're encrypted. And the only person that can decrypt them is the person who has access to that passcode, who then burns that soft node. So perhaps functionally, you may deem them to be similar because you can print them out, you can hold them. You can
Exactly.
Exactly. But outside of that, the security is totally different.
I'm interested to get your take on this. Why do you think that the Lightning Network didn't, I don't want to say like continue, but didn't sort of fulfill that idea of moving ownership? Why do you think they went down a different route?
It may sound bizarre, Layah, but I think our approach is too simple. It's been done before, and people think, can you really just keep moving the ownership of something, right? So if I said to you, look, let's say cars were commodities that you'd never had to move, and I said, look, just take your keys around, use that as ownership of the car, or take your logbook, or with a house, take your deed. It would be too simple to actually take to its fullest degree. So I really think philosophically they got it wrong. It's been complicated from a development perspective, but the idea behind it is actually quite simple.
Okay, that's interesting. And one thing which a lot of people have an issue with when it comes to Bitcoin is, despite it having this incredibly high level of anonymity, it's still not entirely private, because, you know, if I send you one Bitcoin, Russell, you're going to be able to see how much Bitcoin I have in my wallet. You'll be able to see everything that I've ever done. So I'm curious, does Softnote make Bitcoin more anonymous, or maybe even more private?
Exactly that. And I think you've picked up on the fact, Layah, that because we're using a passcode, the only thing that's recorded on that blockchain that actually changes is that passcode. There's no sender details, there's no recipient details. We're just changing the state of, let's say, the access to that particular soft node. So theoretically, you could make thousands of transactions using a soft node, but absolutely nobody will know that it was you that did it, because you just changed a passcode, and they wouldn't know who you sent it to. And a very interesting recent issue, I know you're a big advocate of Andrew Tate, and there's been a few articles that have come out recently that believe that the Romanian authorities actually tracked some of his Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And we know some of it was confiscated anyway. And of course, it seems as though the evidence points towards the fact that they did arrest him without justification. But because they were able to track this data, track this information, immediately a lot of authorities presume that you're doing something untoward, and when there's evidence to the contrary. So the great thing with the soft node is it does actually increase that anonymity. It keeps all the security of Bitcoin, it keeps the decentralization. But if you want that pure freedom to spend your money, considering that it is your money however you want, you get that anonymity with the soft node.
I think that anonymity is so important because, like you mentioned, you know, you brought up Andrew Tate. People just speaking facts, according to me, are getting, you know, deplatformed, cancelled, put in jail, and things like that. And, you know, I always say that money really is the center of everything in life. Like it's the fuel, which just it's the energy which fuels your life. And so, you know, if you don't have control over your money, you don't have, you know, privacy, you're just not a sovereign individual, and you're just a slave to whatever, you know, whatever comes. So that's great to hear that this obviously makes Bitcoin much more private, because in order to make Bitcoin private, obviously it requires different upgrades and this and that, and you start meddling with the actual software itself, which obviously, you know, people don't want to do. Would you say that the Lightning Network has taken off, or would you say that people are now more open to an alternative solution?
Yeah, I think people are really looking for an alternative solution. I mean, Michael Saylor is one of the biggest advocates for the Lightning Network. You can see post upon post of him supporting any new layer 2 solution. And he was recently involved in a university initiative whereby they were taking on anybody who would work with Bitcoin and had an idea as to how they can scale it. So I think the real problem, Layah, is what we needed with the Lightning Network was for everybody to interconnect. If all these channels would have been opened and people were happy to connect with somebody, let's say 4, 5, 7 different locations across the world through different nodes, then it would have functioned perfectly. But the fact that you're shaking your head says it all. People were against that. People really didn't want these watchtower systems. So they keep going back to the native blockchain. They keep settling on the native blockchain. But Layah, just to go back to that previous point about anonymity.
Yeah, let's do it.
A lot of people say, look, why do you need the anonymity? If you're not doing anything that is untoward, do you really need to have that type of privacy? How would you come back to a critic? I mean, we've come across this ourselves.
Yes, a great question. I would give the Edward Snowden response, which is, and I'm going to paraphrase and not quote correctly, so I apologize, but it's something like, oh my God, to say like you don't want privacy because you have nothing to hide is like saying you don't want freedom of speech because you have nothing to say. That's what Edward Snowden said. And so that's my response. It's like, what do you mean you have nothing to hide? What do you mean you have nothing to say? I think privacy is a fundamental human right. I don't think anybody has a right to know what you're up to in your life, how much money you have in your bank, how much money you have in your wallet. I think it's a fundamental human right. And, if people would like to give up their privacy, then I'm all for that. Please do it. And then go find out what happens as a result of giving up your privacy,
Quite. Yeah.
What would you say? What would you say?
Yeah, very similar. It's a human right. We believe that people should have that choice. I mean, look, if somebody wants to use a custodial wallet, that's completely up to them.
Right.
If somebody wants to know that AML is going to have their hands all over any transactions over a certain amount, we know that's going to change with CBDCs. That's completely up to them. But cash was untracked, and we never had a problem with cash, and we believe that it was a human right to have full access to your finances. So yeah, would agree with that.
Well, just on that point about cash, from what I've seen, it's getting harder and harder to spend your cash. Have you noticed that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The
Chinese government have stated time and time again they've got a cashless society. They want a cashless society. And Layah, give me your opinions on why they want that. Why would you say a government would want a cashless society?
Oh my God. Well, we'll get into this, but I mean, a cashless society, you're easier to control. My take, for the people watching, if they've seen my content, it's very much like everything is about control, because you have to understand, what are you replacing cash with? You're not replacing it with like more anonymous money. No, you're replacing it with a central bank digital currency. You're replacing it with either like a Bitcoin, a Fed coin, the digital yuan. And we'll get into CBDCs and everything. But I want to go back a little bit actually to your topic about El Salvador, because part of what I do on social media, as well as talking about CBDCs and all the control that I believe is coming, I also want to get the word out there about Bitcoin, because I do believe it is the answer to a lot of these issues. And I do believe that it is the hardest money on the planet. So I want to see it mass adopted. So I'm curious, how is Tectum, through its soft note, aiding mass adoption? I know you mentioned El Salvador before. So can anyone now have access to a soft note and start sending Bitcoin privately and anonymously, instantly, and almost feeless, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, shout out to our dev team. They've worked tirelessly for about 6 years, and they've got it to a point where it's fully functioning. We've got people minting soft notes at the moment. We've actually had over 1 million this last week of soft notes minted. People are sending them about. The system theoretically is fully functional. So the way we're approaching mass adoption, Layah, is we want to get it in the hands of everybody. I noticed in your book, you stated that Bitcoin solves a lot of humanitarian issues. People who don't have access to banking facilities, people who can't get on the financial ladder because of where they were born or who they were born to. The soft note eradicates all of that. As long as you've got internet access, and theoretically you don't even need that because you can transfer that serial number over the phone, you can get into the soft note system. Now, we recently signed up, we ran a bit of a pilot scheme, and we signed up 10 merchants to accept soft notes. So theoretically, there's a market for it. People want to accept these. They see the utility in it. As soon as that's built out, and we've got our POS system coming in about 2 months, as soon as that's fully functional, we expect to see people starting to spend that. And because we're not bound to this Web3 environment, because it is just a passcode that gets you access to that Bitcoin, we don't see any bounds of the soft note system. Of course, it comes down to how well it's marketed, who takes it on board. But
Mm-hmm.
as soon as people realize the utility, we believe mass adoption could be just around the corner. We actually recently ran a hackathon and we asked as many people to come to our system and find issues. And they did great. They found bugs and they were really helpful bugs that we've been able to address. But nobody's found a fundamental flaw in how the system is working at the moment. So that, of course, gave us great confidence to say, let's get it out there. Let's get some good exposure. Let's get launched and try to bring mass adoption around to the Bitcoin world. I completely agree with you. It's the best currency out there. It's the currency that we should trust. It stood the test of time. And part of what we're saying, Layah, is we're not asking you to trust our blockchain. We have to demonstrate that. We have to prove that our blockchain won't be hacked. But because you can get out of our blockchain with a click of the button, theoretically, you're still trusting Bitcoin. You're just using us as exactly what we say we are, a layer 2 to be able to move it about.
That's so interesting. And one of the things which I didn't know, which I just learned, was the idea that you don't need internet because you can just send a serial. You can send a serial number over the phone. That's crazy. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we were talking about earlier, the soft note is just a serial number and a passcode. So that then gives you access to be able to burn your Bitcoin if you want. But if you just want to transfer that ownership, that serial number at the moment is about 16 digits. You can give somebody a call, give them that serial number, give them that passcode. And that means that they fully own the access. Now, they don't even need to keep it in that system. They don't have to keep it written down. They can take it online. They can use our on-wallet system. They can go off-wallet. But it gives them the full utility to use it however they want. So let's say hypothetically you got banned from the internet, you couldn't get access to the internet. That's not the end of the soft note system.
I understand. That's so interesting. And what would you say your big vision for soft notes is, particularly in terms of acceptability? I know you said you'd be speaking to some merchants, but what's the overall big goal? Would you like to be in countries like El Salvador?
Yeah, absolutely. We believe as soon as we demonstrate the utility, and this is exactly how Bitcoin grew, right? It demonstrated the utility with those people who were purists, those people who wanted to try out the system. They saw the necessity for the system, but it wasn't the big corporations, and to a certain degree still isn't, that get on board with Bitcoin. It was those people who really believed in the vision. And what we want to do is expand our product to everybody who believes in the vision. And once the, let's say, merchants or the government see the utility, and of course those governments that really believe in freedom for the individual, as soon as they see that utility, we believe that they will be taking it on. If it was El Salvador, if the soft note system was there, I'm absolutely sure it would still be fully functioning.
And have you come into any regulatory issues or any, government issues? Because like I said, you're making Bitcoin much more private than it was before.
Yeah, so there's two sides to that coin, Layah. Firstly, we've got to deal with the AML issues. We've got to deal with the KYC issues. And it goes back to the point that you raised earlier. We're going to give people an option. We've got our on-wallet solution that is AML compliant, that is KYC compliant. The blockchain is being built out to be completely decentralized. So all we do is we create a wallet whereby you can have all the bioprotection you need, just like you would at PayPal. You can have all the safety you need. But really the utility is when you either take it off wallet or you use our decentralized option, which is called soft note swap. It's essentially a decentralized wallet that functions with soft notes. So you have a choice between the three. On the on-wallet system, of course, we are complying with AML, we are complying with KYC. That's because we're offering bioprotection. And we see this as an essential route to getting mass adoption. You're not going to get the people who don't really believe in Bitcoin to use Bitcoin unless there's some familiarity there. Yes. If you can give them bioprotection, if you can give them AML, they're more likely to come into the system, try it, see the great utility of soft nodes, see the great utility of Bitcoin, and then say, I'll try it in a more decentralized manner. Let me see if I see the utility there as well.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I want to go back to what we spoke about earlier. And I guess this does lead on from, all the benefits of the soft note. I do want to touch on CBDCs because I think this is something that I've spoken about a lot on Fox News, GB News in the UK. And personally, I just don't think people understand just how quickly they will come and also just how dangerous they're going to be. I've given you my take partly, and we can get into my take a little bit more in a minute, but I'm curious to hear your take, especially because I think the Bank of England actually just hired or are assembling a team of 30 crypto experts
Right.
to build a CBDC.
Absolutely.
So what is your take on central bank digital currencies?
I mean, huge topic. I think there's a lot to get through here. The first thing I'd say about CBDCs is they're not what were promised to us. Originally, when we heard about CBDCs, originally when countries were first looking at CBDCs, we were told they were going to be blockchain projects. We were told they would be centralized, but there would be an immutable ledger. That means you'll always be able to see what's going on. And that's typically not what's happened. And the interesting thing is, I think CBDCs at the moment are demonstrating a hinge point in society that we've never seen before. And what I mean by that is, I think because we've got to a technological point whereby tyranny can be implemented if somebody so desired, we've got to make personal choices. And to kind of flesh this out, Layah, if I said to you, we all prioritize human flourishing, we all prioritize human advantage and being as healthy and happy as possible. If I asked you, what did you think were the main 3 industries that could have an influence on human flourishing, what would you say?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, I mean, crypto personally would be like my number one, just because, as I said, I think that money is the center of everything, and if you don't have money, then you're screwed. Basically,
Right.
you're forever
Yep.
a slave to the government. I haven't thought about the other 2. I mean, like, could I say like crypto and like fitness, the fitness industry?
Absolutely.
Is that an
Yeah.
answer? And then like health and nutrition, perhaps. I don't know. What would you say? I
Pretty
feel like
much.
okay.
I would start right at the top. I'd say philosophy, religion, spirituality. You've got to understand or have a theory of why you're here, to know your purpose.
Yeah.
The second, absolutely, medicine and health. And then I would say the third was finances. But what we're noticing in society, if we start right at the top, everything's censored now. You can't have a religious perspective. You can't have a philosophical perspective. You can't have your own perspective, even on things like family and gender. If we go one step down, we saw everything that happened throughout COVID with regards to the medical industry. And something fascinating about the medical industry is 7 years of med school teaches you what to think, not how to think. And what I'm blown away by is the way the medical professionals actually stood in defense. They were the first ones to stand in defense of the Nazi regime, and they were the first ones to stand in defense of everything that was rolled out through COVID. So we've seen this great shift in those 2 industries. And I believe this is the last one to put full control on all of those 3 industries, so you can take away the ability for a human to obtain human flourishing. So if you can control somebody's finances, you can then control what they do health-wise, medically-wise, and you can also control what they believe. But if you can find some way to liberate yourself, to completely control your finances, you are free to do whatever you want with your body health-wise, and you're also free religiously, philosophically, spiritually, and even from an ethical perspective to believe and say whatever you want.
I think that was put so well. And I agree with you. And I always give this same example. I say during the last 3 years with that flu that went around.
Right.
That crazy flu. I always say, if you didn't take the jab and if CBDCs were implemented at that point, they would have programmed the money so that you could only spend it on certain items. So exactly like you're saying, when you control the money, you're able to control the 3 pillars of your version of happiness. So, food is one of them. And so, yes, when you control the money, you can control what people eat. And another thing as well is those at the World Economic Forum, they want us to eat bugs, basically. Like there's a war on masculinity, and there's a war on meat.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yeah.
So there's a war on meat. And, they say that meat is bad for you. And the more meat you eat, the more the planet's going to die and whatever.
Yeah.
If you eat meat, you're right wing, bigger and all this stuff. So you just program the money so that people aren't allowed to buy so much meat.
Right.
That's the way I look at it. I say, okay, well, they want to implement a carbon allowance. How do you do that? Through the money. So say you bought a bunch of burgers or whatever, or you filled up your car. When you go and buy the burgers, you've reached your carbon allowance and then it gets declined. Now we all have to eat bugs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a study recently that was associated with the World Economic Forum, and they said this, which is really quite astounding. They said the number one benefit of CBDCs to the individual user or the average civilian is that you no longer have to file your taxes. So the government can just take your taxes.
That's crazy.
Think about how much information they have to accumulate to be able to work out exactly
How much you owe. That's amazing. Where did you see that? I want to write that down so I can look it up after
Yeah,
this.
I'll get you over the document. It was
Oh,
a
okay.
recent
Send it to me.
review that the World Economic Forum were publishing.
Okay, I'm going to just write that down. World Economic Forum. Okay, cool. Wow. And that's so interesting. But it's so funny. It's like the world would be a much better place if we had full transparency. So we were able to see where their money went, where our tax dollars or pounds or whatever, where our taxes went. We don't have access to that. But of course, like all relationships with the government, it's going to be entirely one-sided. So they're able to see everything that we have ever done, but we're unable to see everything that they've done, and how our tax dollars are being spent on wars and so on and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fascinating thing is throughout history, the role of government has been to protect those who are feeble, benefit those or reward those who do well, and punish those who do wrong. That's got nothing to do with finances. That's got nothing to do with controlling your free speech. It's got nothing to do with what you believe. And throughout those three layers that we spoke about, I think we've seen the government go far beyond their actual bounds, far beyond their actual responsibilities. And we're by no means anti-government. The government is so essential for law and order. I mean, I've spoken to you, Layah. You love Dubai. You love everything that's going on in Miami. There's a reason for that. The government are doing a great job. But when the government goes beyond what their bounds are, for example, into finances, it's the human's responsibility to create a system that can combat that. And that's what we believe we're doing with soft notes. So essentially, if you stay in Bitcoin, everybody talks about Bitcoin as a store of value. It only really becomes a circulating currency on a layer 2. And if that layer 2 is as scalable and expansive as a soft note, then you essentially get that freedom from the government, if they would, where they have, going beyond their bounds.
What's really interesting to me, before we obviously went live and, we had this conversation, you were sort of saying, yeah, I'm happy to discuss all sorts of things. And that's so refreshing. And I love that. But I'm curious because it's quite unique. I often find a lot of people who are building things, who are like CEOs of companies and so on, are often quite uncomfortable talking about different social issues or speaking about these things. So I love that, you're really open about it. So how comes? Like what makes you different in that sense? Yeah, I like it. How come you're so different in that sense?
I mean, if you met our team, Layah, you would get it. We're all of the same mindset. We all have this very similar ideologies. We've made similar choices. And that's what's drawn us to this project. This is why we've developed this project, because it is the case that we believe that you need to have financial freedom. It is the case that we believe that essentially, without that financial freedom, you work up those 3 tiers and you get bound. And the reason why we're happy to be so open about these things is because we don't believe that we're actually going beyond the way history has functioned for so long. We're just saying we need to go back to the point where we have liberty. We're pro-government, we're pro-control, we do not support anarchy, but we are pro-human liberty. And so, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of CEOs would avoid the topic because I guess they've got a lot to lose in the current industry that they're in, but the soft note is for the libertarian. And if you're not a libertarian, you're probably not going to love a soft note.
I respect that. I love that. I think that makes so much sense. I see so many amazing companies in this space shy away from these kind of issues. And I'm like, do you not know who your audience is? Your audience, like your customers want this. Like this is, they want you to be of that similar mindset. And I think as well, it helps people, develop like trust with you and understand you and realize your mission is the same as theirs. And I think that's like a huge win for people like Elon Musk, for example, because obviously he's taken over Twitter and he's doing a great job. He's calling out all sorts of rubbish. I mean, did you see the interview that he did with the BBC yesterday?
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So yeah, our co-founder sent that over to me and I just thought, yeah, all you're doing is calling out the truth, but it's so countercultural that the reaction was just disbelief.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It was really crazy. So no, I commend you for being so open. And I think that it's, it's going to be a net positive for Tectum in the future. Absolutely. I want to get your take on the markets, actually. Bitcoin is pumping. We're at $30,000, which kind of upsets me because I feel like I still didn't stack enough, and ETH is at 2K. But
Everyone's got that feeling at the moment.
yeah, I do feel that way. But what is your take on the market right now? Do you think we're finally seeing a decoupling of Bitcoin from the general financial markets?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're seeing. And there are numerous perspectives from economists about exactly what's happened with Bitcoin over the last 2-3 months. Of course, we've heard a lot of fear mongering about the general stock markets dropping, property dropping, and we have actually seen that. Whether we've seen the bottom of it and how far that's going to go, it depends on which side of the coin you land. And of course, there are those who are also saying it's a completely fabricated recession. We've also seen some of the biggest oil companies tripling their prices, but tripling their profits. So people are pointing to the fact that that can't make sense economically. So my hypothesis is, as things currently stand, and you highlighted this in your book, Layah, as soon as the government pushes harder, people push back. As soon as the government implements more financial control, more people get into Bitcoin. And I think we're seeing the decentralized currencies doing a little bit better than the centralized cryptocurrencies. So I think that's just conducive of the fact that people are saying we can no longer trust the USD, we can no longer trust fiat currency. What's the most trustable option outside of that? So I don't think these are big risk takers. I think they're people who are saying Bitcoin stood the test of time. Bitcoin's been absolutely resilient. Nobody's hacked Bitcoin. If I'm not using a fiat currency that hinges on supposed government trust, I'm going to go for the most trusted cryptocurrency. And we all know Bitcoin leads that run. So I think exactly what we're seeing is people wanting to get into that so as to be involved in something that has great longevity, but also avoids all the pitfalls of the current fiat system.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that is something that I push a lot. The idea of if the government becomes more authoritarian and,
Right. Absolutely.
increases its control, then people will wake up. I mean, I know just so many people were so orange pilled
Right.
during COVID.
Yeah.
I know so many people that turned to Bitcoin during that time. What happened in Canada with Justin Trudeau and the truckers. I know that orange pilled a lot of people. Even just a lot of people in England, because England, from my experience, you can obviously tell me if you feel the same, I feel is often quite behind when it comes to innovation and tech.
Absolutely.
And so many people in England finally understood Bitcoin when Justin Trudeau froze people's
Right.
bank accounts for
Yeah.
protesting the rights to their own body. So absolutely, I agree with you. I think, the more authoritarian it becomes, the more people run to Bitcoin. And then on top of that as well, I thought the USDC depeg was really fascinating. And I actually spoke about this on my spaces. And I was holding USDC. I hold many different coins.
Okay. Yeah.
USDC was one of them. And it was a Friday night. I was in Florida, and it was a Friday night, and I was out. And I looked at my phone, and I was like, oh my God, I'm down 10%. Like, why is my USDC
How
down?
did that happen?
Right. And I'm there just like out and worried and concerned. And so I ended up, asking myself, what do I do?
Right.
Do I
Absolutely.
where do I put the money to prevent a potential lunar catastrophic
Right.
result?
Yeah. And
Um,
what does anyone do in those situations?
right. You say, okay, what can I do? I have to move the money now into the easiest thing that I can access and the safest thing that I have access to.
Yeah.
The only answer to that is Bitcoin. I'm not going to turn it to cash. Can't do
Right.
that. I'm not going to move it into a bank. It's too difficult right now. Just simple swap to Bitcoin is really the only solution. And to me personally, I feel like that's what sort of sparked this run.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's fascinating I think it's probably the first time in history that we can say Bitcoin has officially decoupled from the general stocks markets. It's going upwards, they're going down. We're in a supposed recession. Economists say in a recession, people take less risks. And I think that's completely true. You're actually taking less of a risk when you go for Bitcoin now. And I think the principle stands true, but actually Bitcoin is essentially stating that it's going to be a separate entity from what the general market does, because it's offering something totally different to what the market does.
Exactly. And also, I'm just curious, can you tell me a little bit about your background in crypto? I know you say you've been developing, the soft note for quite a few years now. How long have you been in crypto?
So yeah, really interesting question and very similar to your experience. So I know you stated in your book that you had a certain amount of fiat currency frozen. I had a very similar
Yes.
experience, and it was frozen for the amount of time that it would make incredible complications.
Oh,
And this was all on the basis of absolutely no evidence, absolutely no data. The money was then released quite a few months later with no apology, no understanding that they didn't do their due diligence. And all throughout that time, I was stood there saying, that's my money. You can't take my money away. But the fact of the matter is, they could, and they did. And that propelled me more so into crypto. I was always in crypto. I loved crypto. And I've got a medical background, so I was working in R&D at the time. And it then caused me to look for employment inside the Web3 space. And it was that brought me across to this project when the project was, I guess, in its infancy stages with regards to Softnote. And it's the thing that drives me here. It drives all of us. The idea that we can have full liberty, but more so that we can give financial liberty to the world. And because the soft note accomplishes that, it gives everybody the chance, if they want to avoid that situation that you went through, Layah, and the situation that I went through. That became the driving factor to be in the space.
actually, that's similar to me. Yeah, the financial liberty to the world. Because I remember when I was first learning about blockchain technology quite a few years ago, and I just loved the idea that you didn't need a bank account, and anyone anywhere in the world, as long as they have internet access, can get involved. And it also like opens up the global economy, because when I'm doing business with different people, I'm not just doing business with Americans or Brits. I now have access to people all over the world who can make themselves much more competitive financially to the people who are in my own country. And I just pay them in crypto, and now we have this global economy where everybody is put on the financial map. And personally, I just love that.
Yeah, I mean, Layah, look, I loved your tweet when you spoke about the person you hired in Pakistan using
Yeah,
Bitcoin.
exactly.
Right, for about a fifth of what you were going to pay in the USA.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point. Everybody talks about equality of opportunity, and you've got numerous people on the right, to use an American term, constantly espousing equality of opportunity. There's no quicker way to pull down the barriers of equality of opportunity than Bitcoin. Of course, we've got to scale it. That's why we think we are the solution for that. But if you want to give everybody a chance, most people have an internet connection these days. Most people have a phone. If you want to give that intellect that happened to be born in South Mongolia and never gets a chance to go to university, but he's a very talented kid, you need to enable him to be able to spend money, receive money in a way that doesn't bind him to some of the centralized systems.
Absolutely. And it's so funny because it's like a lot of the time these people who demand equality of outcome are the very people who hate Bitcoin so much. And it's like, what do you mean? We're literally leveling the playing field here. We're doing the very thing you want.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah,
Indeed.
exactly. So what else do you have planned for Tectum?
So we are currently embarking on our launch. We've got our pre-sale that is currently running, but it's only running for a few more days on our website, so you can get the token. The token gives you access to mint soft notes. Of course, you don't have to do that. And you pointed out there are people who are just going to want to get a soft note, send a soft note, use a soft note. They don't want to get involved in the whole ecosystem. They don't have to do that. But the token allows you to mint soft notes. It allows you to provide liquidity. Once you've minted and provided liquidity, there's an actual reward system that functions in all of that. When a soft note makes fees, and we're only charging the merchant, when as things currently stand, we're not charging the end user. That's our plan to get mass adoption going. So you are sending soft notes for free. But as soon as it goes through a retail environment, we're charging the merchant up to about 0.75%. So we're more competitive than all the other payment solutions out there, but rewards are then brought back to the person that minted the soft note. So the reason why we've got 1 million soft notes already minted on our system is because we've got these purists that absolutely love the project, and they've gone ahead and minted them. But they're getting them out to people who don't care about minting. They're not interested in providing liquidity. They just want to utilize the system. So as things currently stand, that pre-sale is going on. We've got a couple of CEX listings that are going to come next month or the month after. Prior to that, we've also got a Pink Sale listing. And a lot of people have said, was Pink Sale the platform that suited Tectum the most? But it goes back to what we were talking about, Layah. The decentralized industries are absolutely booming at the moment. Everybody's wanting to get into that system whereby they no longer have to trust a third-party entity. And Pink Sale does that so well. Of course, you get a lot of poor coins on there, but Pink Sale is absolutely thriving for the best projects. So we're going down the DEX route. Pink Sale, then perhaps it's going to be Uniswap. And then we're going to look at the other CEXs, and we have actually signed some contracts for that. So it's all about our launch at the moment, bringing people towards the project and getting soft notes into the hands of the people.
So how can people stay up to date and follow everything that's going on with the launch?
So the best way to do that is probably our Twitter and our website. You can find both of those in the link. Our website's constantly updated with blog articles. Our Twitter is also in the description below. But do hop into our Telegram group. One of the great things about our Telegram group is so many of our initiatives have been community driven. So people get on there, they ask questions, they give us ideas, and straight away we bring them back to the decision makers in the team, and we can implement your suggestions. So because we're building the system for the community, we want the community involvement. So yeah, do hop into there and give us your thoughts on everything that we're doing.
That's amazing. I'm going to leave all of that information in the YouTube description. So I'll leave the link to the Telegram and the website and everything else that you mentioned in the description. Well, Russell, is there anything else you'd like to add, or do you feel like we covered anything? Is there anything else you want to add before I wrap up?
Yeah, final question to you, Layah. So a lot of people talk about the fact that currently Bitcoin's this store of value. And it was a fascinating conversation I had with somebody from the Cato Institute. Are you familiar with the Cato Institute?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so they follow CPAC around, the conservatives style conference. You get the Ben Shapiro's there. And they're on the financial side of things. And it was quite a big VC that we were having a conversation with. And he's been very pro-Bitcoin up until now. And we were pitching our product to him. And he essentially turned to me and said, Russell, give up. You're not going to beat the USD. Bitcoin is never going to get to the position where you want it to. And the best thing to do is to get on board with these CBDCs, but just try and make them as transparent as possible. Now, my question to you then, Layah, is if at the moment the circulating supply of Bitcoin is so low, what do you see the solution being?
Well, I mean, it's divisible, right? So, and I think that's a great thing. It's divisible. We can all have 0.00 whatever, have 1,000 satoshis or whatever it is. One satoshi could become $1. And I think that's a good thing. It means that the money is more scarce. Like I don't want something with such a large circulating supply. I know, of course, this is like a really big controversial topic. I've heard people debate this before, but I don't want something with such a large circulating supply. The fact that we have this limited supply will mean that we're transacting with a currency which will increase in value rather than devalue, like the US dollar. And I really disagree with this idea of you can't win, so you can't beat them, so you might as well join them. I mean, it's just such a defeated mentality. I just don't support that in the slightest. And I also am very aware that CBDCs will never be transparent, and they will never be fair, and they will be the spy coin. They will be an authoritarian force for bad. And so I think that we should give every bit of our energy to creating things which beat them or which compete with them. I definitely don't agree with, we can't beat them, so just bow down and join them. That's not something that I
absolutely completely agree, Layah. So Layah, tell me, how do you think we did at undressing the soft note?
Oh, I think you did a great job. And I love that you read my book. Thank you so much. I noticed you really did read it. You really did give it you really did read it. No, I think you did a great job. It's really interesting. And no, I'm excited. I'm excited about everything that you have coming up, simply because, I do believe in Bitcoin. I just don't necessarily believe in the Lightning Network. I did obviously write in the book that there are issues. And I think it's going to be very difficult to be mass adopted. Like you said, people don't want to be opening up a million different channels. And so, yeah, like we need a scaling solution. You know, we need something which allows Bitcoin to be able to be transacted instantly, so that it can really become that global medium of exchange. And if soft note is the answer, then that's great. And you know, so I'm personally going to be catching up with you very soon, because I want to know. I want to know what's happening. I want to see Bitcoin adoption as soon as possible.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Fascinating to talk, Layah.
Yeah, Russell, thank you so much for coming on the show. Guys, thank you all so much for watching. Definitely go check out Tectum. I'm really fascinated to see whether they will be the ultimate Bitcoin scaling solution. I think that's going to be really interesting. And if you did enjoy this kind of content, then please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, because we will be covering more of this. And obviously, we'll be bringing Russell back to get an update in a few weeks. So, Russell, thank you so much for coming on the show. And we will see you all next week. Bye-bye.